I used to think our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner was untouchable, predictable in the best way. My husband Daniel carving the turkey with that practiced grin, my mother-in-law Evelyn inspecting the table as if she personally curated every detail, my 9-year-old daughter Lena sneaking extra rolls when she thought no one was watching. It was the one night each year where no one argued, no one compared bank accounts, and no one tried to one-up anyone else. Just warmth, candles, polished silverware, and that soft hum of relatives catching up. At least, that's how it looked from the outside. This year, I walked into the dining room holding a tray of roasted vegetables, smiling because the moment actually felt perfect. Everyone was in place. The chandelier glowed. Daniel stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, joking with his sister Marissa about who burned the stuffing last year. I set the tray down, brushed my hair behind my ear, and leaned in to kiss him. That's when I saw it, a faint, dark smudge on his collar. Mascara. Not mine. My smile did not move, but something under it cracked like thin ice. I glanced around the table. No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and they were pretending not to. Daniel caught my stare and said, with a light laugh that didn't fit the room, "You always look so serious, Claire. Try relaxing tonight." A few cousins laughed politely. His tone was smooth, but behind it was something smug, like he knew I wouldn't dare question him in front of everyone. Across the table, Evelyn cleared her throat. "Let's keep the mood festive," she said sharply. "We don't want another scene like last Christmas." There had been no scene last Christmas. But she loved implying there had been. She lifted her wine glass with a pointed smile, signaling I should let whatever I saw go. That expectation, the silent family rule, wrapped around the room like a tightening ribbon. Smile. Be agreeable. Maintain the facade. I took a slow sip of water, hiding the fact my fingers trembled. Then I noticed something else, a folded envelope wedged halfway under Daniel's plate. Gold-trimmed. Thick cardstock. The kind used by attorneys or estate managers. My eyes narrowed just enough to read the handwritten initials on the corner. E.C. Evelyn Carter. My mother-in-law. Daniel covered the envelope with his hand the moment he saw me looking. "We'll talk later," he whispered without moving his lips. That whisper was colder than the November wind hitting the windows. My stomach tightened. Something was happening behind my back, something coordinated. And judging from Evelyn's watchful eyes, Marissa's tight posture, Daniel's forced charm, and that envelope, I was the only one not in on it. But it was the next moment that turned the room electric. Daniel reached for the carving knife, and as he adjusted his grip, his sleeve slid back, revealing a fresh scratch running up his wrist. Long, thin. Like fingernails. My breath caught. The room continued buzzing with casual conversation, but everything dimmed for me. The scratch. The mascara. The envelope. The silence. And then Marissa leaned toward Daniel and murmured, soft, but not soft enough. "Just act normal until after the reading. She won't figure it out." I froze. What reading? What weren't they expecting me to figure out? Daniel's face twitched. "Marissa," he hissed under his breath. But the damage was done. I had heard it. Every word. The room looked normal, but it no longer felt normal. It felt staged, everyone playing a part in a script I hadn't been given. I placed my napkin on my lap, spine straightening. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply watched them. Quietly. Methodically. And while I watched, a clear thought formed. If they thought I wouldn't figure it out, they were underestimating the wrong woman. I glanced briefly toward the camera of my own mind, the place where I speak to you, the viewer, and for the first time that night, I asked myself something aloud. Do any of you watching know that moment, when a room is smiling, but you suddenly sense the blade underneath? If you do, tell me in the comments. What tipped you off? And did you confront it or wait until you had proof? Because I had no proof. Not yet. But I would. And it would start with that envelope under his plate. I lifted my glass again to hide the shift in my voice, leaned slightly closer to Daniel, and said quietly enough for only him to hear. Whatever this is, I'm going to find out. He stiffened. And that's when the chandelier flickered overhead, drawing every eye upward for a split second, just long enough for me to slide the envelope a single inch closer toward me, unseen. The game had begun. 2 weeks before that Thanksgiving dinner, the first fracture appeared, small enough that I almost dismissed it, but sharp enough to scratch at the back of my mind. It was a Tuesday morning, just after I dropped Lena off at school. I had stopped by the Carter family office downtown to sign routine quarterly paperwork. Nothing unusual. Daniel's family owned 3 small commercial properties, and as his wife, I held a minority stake in one, inherited through my father. I rarely interfered in their internal operations. But Evelyn greeted me with a smile too sweet, and Marissa hovered in the doorway of her office like she was guarding something. The energy felt off, but I tried not to read into it. We'd had our share of tension, but this felt strategic. I took a seat in the small glass-walled conference room, rearranging my blazer to stay comfortable. Evelyn slid a thin folder toward me. Just standard acknowledgments, she said casually. Your signature won't affect anything major. That phrasing alone made me uneasy. Evelyn never cared whether something affected me majorly or not. She cared whether I complied. I flipped through the pages. Financial updates, tenant reports, repairs, nothing suspicious. But when I reached the final page, her hand darted out. Oh, that one's internal, she said too quickly. Just skip it. I tilted my head. If it involves the property I co-own, I need to read it. A tight smile pinched her lips. It's unrelated. Then why was it in my folder? Marissa appeared beside her as if summoned. We're on a schedule, she said. Let's not make this complicated. That word, complicated, was always their way of telling me to sit down and stay quiet. A subtle boundary meant to make me feel like an outsider taking up space. And usually, I let it slide. But something in their posture made me look anyway. It was an agenda page, one line highlighted in yellow. Preliminary discussion, updated beneficiary allocations, draft review. My heart thudded once. Beneficiary allocations review. This wasn't a maintenance meeting. They were discussing the family trust, the same trust Daniel once told me wasn't changing anytime soon. Evelyn's hand snapped the folder shut. As I said, she murmured, it's internal. I met her stare. Then it shouldn't be in my paperwork at all. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air thickened. Then Evelyn laughed lightly, pretending the entire thing was an administrative mix-up. I let it go outwardly. Internally, I filed it away. They were planning something that involved me, or excluded me. I left the office with that folder feeling heavier than it should have. On my way out, while waiting for the elevator, I overheard Evelyn and Marissa talking in the hallway, low, urgent voices. One line slipped through clearly. She won't be a problem. Daniel will keep her in line until everything is finalized. The elevator dinged, masking the rest. I stood perfectly still inside the mirrored elevator, staring at my reflection, composed, steady, professional, but my pulse hammered. Keep me in line? Until what was finalized? That was seed one. It should have been enough to confront Daniel immediately. But that week, he traveled for business, acting warm over text, calling at night with the same affectionate tone he always used when he wanted me calm. Everything okay at home? He'd ask. Yes, I'd reply, because saying anything else without proof would only make me look paranoid. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Marissa kept their distance. No calls. No check-ins. Radio silence. It was the quietest week I'd ever had from them, and somehow the silence felt louder than their usual criticism. Then, 3 days before Thanksgiving, Lena came into the kitchen holding Daniel's tablet. "Mommy, is EC Finance Liaison a person?" she asked. My blood ran cold. Daniel never saved full names in his contacts. It was always initials. But I had never seen that one before. I gently took the tablet. "Where did you see that?" It popped up when I pressed the little circle button. It said 2 new messages. I read the preview on the lock screen. EC Finance Liaison, confirming Thursday's timing. Will she be present? Thursday. Thanksgiving. Present. Meaning, me? I locked the screen before Lena noticed my breath hitch. "That's just one of Daddy's work contacts," I said softly. "Let's not touch his tablet anymore, okay?" She nodded and ran off. But my mind was already racing. Evelyn Carter. EC Finance Liaison. Coordinating timing. Checking if I'd attend. The trust meeting. The folder. The strange urgency. It was no longer paranoia. It was a pattern. By the time Thanksgiving dinner arrived, I wasn't angry anymore. I was prepared. I just didn't know the mascara on Daniel's collar or the scratch on his wrist would add an entirely new layer of betrayal. And as I watched him cover that gold-trimmed envelope under his plate, every suspicion from the past 2 weeks crystallized into a single resolve. Whatever trap they were setting, I wasn't stepping into a blind. It was time to gather my own evidence. Back at the Thanksgiving table, with the envelope now slightly shifted toward me, the room's warmth felt artificial, like the heat from a lamp, bright but dead. Daniel continued carving the turkey as if nothing were wrong, but he kept his wrist turned inward, hiding the scratch. Every so often, he glanced at me with a rehearsed smile, the kind meant to signal compliance. But he looked nervous. Marissa wasn't much better. She kept checking her phone under the table, angling the screen away each time I shifted. Evelyn presided at the opposite end with a smug confidence that irritated me more now that I knew she'd been discussing keeping me in line. I lifted my fork, tasted nothing, and let my eyes drift from face to face. Everyone seemed in on something. Everyone except me. I needed my next breadcrumb. It arrived faster than I expected. As dessert was served, Marissa announced she'd be stepping outside for a quick call. She slipped her phone into her coat pocket and motioned toward the patio door. But when she stood, something fell from her pocket, a paper slip, folded twice. She bent fast to grab it, but I saw the words printed across the top. "Will, preliminary executor notes." My breath hitched. The door closed behind her. Daniel watched me too closely, pretending not to. Evelyn spoke loudly about the pie crust, trying to drown the tension. But Marissa had made a mistake leaving that paper in view. A very big mistake. Just then, Lena tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can I go show Aunt Marissa my drawing?" I caught her hand gently. "Stay here with Grandma for a minute, sweetheart." Because I needed to be the one stepping outside. I stood, excusing myself with a polite smile. Daniel's jaw tightened. I slipped out onto the patio into the cool night air. Marissa's voice carried softly across the yard. She wasn't talking to a friend. She wasn't talking about pie. Her words were clipped, tense. "Yes, Thursday. Yes, she's here. No, she doesn't know anything yet." My stomach twisted. A pause. "Of course he'll sign. He thinks she won't fight it. Evelyn said she'll handle the rest." Another pause. "No, she won't be a problem. She never is." That sentence was the spark that changed everything. I moved silently, positioning myself near the hedges. Not close enough to be seen, but close enough to catch the last line. "Well, once the amendment goes through, she'll be out for good." My pulse thundered. Out. For good. She ended the call and walked toward the patio door. I slipped inside from the opposite side, returning to the table just before she reappeared. Daniel glanced at me with a strange, searching expression, like he was checking if I had heard anything. I met his eyes without blinking. He looked away first. That's when Seed 2 hit me like a whisper from the future, confirmation that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't paranoia. They were deliberately rearranging the family trust, excluding me, manipulating Daniel, coordinating timing, preparing executor notes, and tonight was the final step. I stared at the envelope again. Its edge glinted under the chandelier. Something inside it held the next piece of the puzzle. But opening it at the table would expose my hand too soon. I needed to stay the composed, observant wife they assumed I was. While everyone resumed conversation, I turned inward again and spoke, quietly, but directly, to the unseen camera behind this story. Have any of you ever realized your own family was planning something behind your back? Comment if you've experienced that moment when suspicion turns into certainty. And what was the clue that finally confirmed it for you? Because that moment had just arrived for me. The transition from doubt to clarity felt like cold water hitting hot metal, an instant hiss, then silence. I reached for my water glass, steadying my breathing. Marissa took her seat, overly calm, face flushed from the cold or the call. Evelyn asked her if everything was settled. She nodded discreetly. Daniel tried to cut through the tension with small talk. He wasn't smiling anymore. But I was. Because I finally knew what this dinner really was. It wasn't a celebration. It was a curtain, one they hoped I wouldn't peek behind. The problem was, I already had. And now I needed the final, undeniable proof. As I reached down discreetly, sliding the envelope fully onto my lap under the table, one thought sharpened everything. If they were planning to erase me from their version of the future, I'd better secure my place in the story before they finished writing me out. The envelope felt heavier than paper. It felt like truth. And I was ready for it. The envelope lay against my lap like a heartbeat, quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. The edges were crisp, the weight substantial. Beside me, Daniel chatted stiffly with cousins he barely tolerated. Across the table, Evelyn watched with that brittle smile she used whenever she believed she was orchestrating a victory. They had no idea the envelope wasn't under Daniel's plate anymore. I waited until the next round of wine pours, using the distraction to slip the envelope beneath my napkin and rise from the table. Just stepping to the restroom, I murmured with a polite smile. Daniel's hand twitched toward me, almost as if he'd rise to follow, but Evelyn pressed 2 fingers to his forearm, light, elegant, controlling. Let her breathe, she said softly. It's a long evening. Her tone told me everything. They needed me calm, unsuspecting, quiet until after the reading. They didn't want confrontation tonight. They wanted submission. That made me smile in a way they didn't catch. Once inside the guest bathroom, I locked the door, turned on the faucet for noise, and pulled out the envelope. Gold trim. Evelyn's initials. A wax seal half cracked. Daniel must have opened it earlier. Inside, I found 3 items. A typed document with attorney letterhead. A handwritten note from Evelyn. And a single sheet of revisions titled Trust Amendment, Preliminary Division Outline. My pulse stumbled. The amendment outlined the Carter family trust, valued at just under $3.8 million, being redistributed. Daniel's share reduced. Marissa's increased. 2 new beneficiaries added, a charitable foundation with no name yet and an unnamed liaison entity. But the most glaring change sat in bold. Removal of Claire Carter from contingent beneficiary status. Not reduced. Removed. My name, gone entirely. Below it was Evelyn's handwritten note. Daniel, sign prelim tonight. Final to be notarized Monday. Do not mention to her until after Thanksgiving. Keep her calm. We will handle her exit. My breath left me. Her exit. They were removing me not only from the trust, but from the family's financial ecosystem. They planned to do it quietly, assuming I wouldn't challenge them. They assumed Daniel could manage me like a volatile variable. They had severely underestimated my intelligence. But something else bothered me. Why was Daniel signing prelim tonight? And why did the amendment timeline matter so much? I scanned the attorney page. At the bottom, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Will reading scheduled for December 2nd, Carter Family Properties. So that's what Marissa meant by the reading. They were using the will reading of Daniel's late uncle, whose property had always caused internal conflict, to finalize internal shuffling. And they wanted me out before new distributions went public. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. But there was one more document in the envelope that froze me. A phone screenshot printout. A message thread between Daniel and someone saved as L guest services. The preview texts were unmistakably intimate, but what chilled me wasn't their tone, it was the timestamp. Monday, 11:42 a.m. The same time he told me he was in a meeting with contractors. The last message from L guest services read: "Don't forget the scratch marks I left." Winking face tells her nothing. The scratch on his wrist. The mascara smudge. The late phone calls. The hotel guest services liaison. Everything aligned with terrifying clarity. This was no accidental betrayal. It was a full-scale exit strategy for him too, a future where he shed obligations, including me, just as easily as Evelyn discarded inconvenient signatures. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold truth settle over my bones. That's when I pulled out my phone. I opened my camera. I scanned every document, every page, every message printout. Crisp. Clear. Timestamped. Organized into a hidden folder only I could access. This was my proof. When I stepped out of that bathroom, someone was waiting for me. Marissa. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, pretending nonchalance. "Everything okay?" she asked with a syrupy tone. "Yes," I replied, smoothing my hair. "Why wouldn't it be?" She studied me carefully, searching for cracks. "You've been quiet tonight." "Just noticing things," I said. The corner of her mouth twitched. "You always notice more than you should." That was the closest she'd ever come to admitting fear. I walked past her, letting her clutch her phone tighter as if she sensed a shift she couldn't name. When I returned to the table, Daniel rose slightly, scanning my face. "You all right?" he asked. "Never better," I said, sliding into my seat with perfect calm. I placed my napkin on my lap again. The envelope stayed in the bathroom trash bin, empty. The real contents were already uploaded and backed up twice. I lifted my glass and took a small, deliberate sip. They thought they had trapped me. But I had just secured the receipts that would undo every one of their plans. And dinner wasn't even over yet. The moment I returned to the table, I felt them studying me, Daniel most of all. His eyes searched my face for any sign that I'd seen too much. I offered him nothing but a calm, collected smile, one that made him swallow hard before looking away. Dessert plates came and went. Conversations drifted into casual chatter. But beneath the surface, tension tightened like invisible strings. Everyone waited for the same moment, when Daniel would stand, clear his throat, and make whatever announcement Evelyn had rehearsed for him. But I wasn't going to wait for their performance. I let the room settle into a lull, wine glasses half empty, forks resting, candles softening the edges of every face. Then I straightened my spine, set my napkin aside, and said in a clear, even tone, "I'd like to share something before dessert ends." 8 chairs shifted. Daniel froze in place, smile stiff. Evelyn's hand tightened around her stemware. I wasn't loud. I wasn't emotional. My restraint unnerved them more than shouting ever could. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I began, "about how trust works in a family. How honesty isn't optional. How partnership isn't a courtesy. It's a requirement." Evelyn cut in sharply. "Claire, tonight is not the time." "Actually," I said, turning my gaze to her, "tonight is the perfect time." A hush fell over the room. One cousin stopped mid-sip. Someone shifted uneasily. Daniel made a small, desperate attempt to regain control. "Honey, why don't we talk later?" We don't want a repeat of. He hesitated. Because there had never been a repeat of anything. No scene. No meltdown. No outburst. His fabricated narrative died in his throat. I folded my hands neatly. I'd like to know something, Daniel. When were you planning to tell me about the trust amendment? The reaction was instantaneous. Marissa stiffened. Evelyn's eyes widened just enough to betray panic. Daniel's fork slipped against his plate with a metallic scrape. What amendment? He tried, voice cracking. The one scheduled for Monday, I said mildly. The one that removes me entirely, shrinks your share, increases Marissa's, and introduces 2 new beneficiaries. Including a fake foundation. Someone gasped. A cousin murmured, "Oh my God." Evelyn pushed back her chair with a soft thud. That is private family business. You have no right. I have every right, I said, when my name is in it. Or more accurately, when it's being erased from it. Daniel's face flushed deep red. Claire, calm down. Evelyn explained the restructuring. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I tilted my head. Removing your wife behind her back isn't personal? He opened his mouth, but I continued before he found a lie to use. And if the trust amendment was the only issue, maybe I'd believe this was strictly financial. But then there's the hotel liaison. Marissa's water glass paused halfway to her lips. Evelyn went pale. Daniel's voice dropped. You're misunderstanding. I'm not, I said. Not the messages. Not the timestamp. Not her little note reminding you the scratch on your wrist was from her. Gasps rippled across the table. Daniel's jaw clenched. You're twisting things. I held up my phone. I don't need to twist anything. I have everything documented. I didn't show the screen. I didn't need to. The assertion alone destabilized the entire fragile performance they'd choreographed. Evelyn stood abruptly. You will not weaponize private information to embarrass this family. I stood as well, slowly, deliberately. I'm not embarrassing the family. I'm exposing those who tried to corner me quietly. You underestimated me because I stayed calm. Because I didn't cause scenes. Because I didn't compete for attention. But calm doesn't mean blind. And silence doesn't mean weak. I leaned forward just slightly. And you don't get to decide when I speak. Daniel pushed up from his chair. You're trying to ruin me. No, I said. You did that when you cheated and partnered with your mother to stage a financial exit plan. Whispers broke out. A cousin excused himself. Marissa's face crumpled with anger. Evelyn slammed her napkin onto the table. Claire, sit down this instant. I looked her directly in the eye. Evelyn, for the first time tonight, I am exactly where I need to be. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, panicking. Claire, please, let's go somewhere private. We can fix. No. We won't fix anything. But we will address everything. I reached into my blazer pocket and placed a neatly folded document on the table. It wasn't the trust amendment. It was the prenuptial review I'd quietly requested years earlier. One clause glinted like a blade. In the event of infidelity, the non-offending spouse retains full claim to marital assets and all jointly acquired property. The room went silent. Daniel's shoulders collapsed. Marissa whispered, You brought a prenup to Thanksgiving? I smiled. No. I brought fairness. Then I delivered the line that changed the power dynamic forever. Daniel. I'm not the one who needs to be quiet tonight. He dropped back into his chair like the air had been punched out of him. Evelyn sank slowly into hers. And the room finally understood. Their plan didn't just fail. It detonated in their faces. For a long moment after the prenup landed on the table, no one breathed. The candles flickered, the chandelier hummed, and the entire Carter family sat frozen, as if the universe had briefly paused to watch their downfall unfold. Daniel stared at the clause like it was written in a language he'd never learned. His lips parted, closed, parted again. "Claire, we can talk about this. Please." I remained standing, calm, steady, absolute. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You made your choices. I'm simply acknowledging them." Evelyn rose on trembling legs. "You don't understand how this family operates. If you walk away now, you'll destroy everything. Our reputation." "Your reputation isn't my shield," I replied softly. "It's your weapon. And I'm done being targeted by it." Her jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No. I'll recover from this." "You'll regret underestimating me." A ripple went through the room, something between awe and fear. Evelyn sat down slowly, as if her spine had suddenly lost the ability to hold her pride upright. Daniel managed a whisper. "So what, now you're divorcing me?" I met his eyes with a steadiness he'd never earned. "No. You're divorcing yourself. I'm just filing the paperwork." His face collapsed, and in it I saw the truth. He had expected tears. Chaos. Pleading. A wife unraveling. Instead, he found a woman who had already rebuilt herself. I gathered the prenup page, slid it back into my bag, and let my next words settle over the table like a quiet verdict. "On Monday, while you're attempting to sign that trust amendment, my attorney will be filing the infidelity trigger clause. Every asset you thought you'd maneuver away from me becomes mine. Lena stays with me. The home stays with me." Daniel's hands shook. "Lena shouldn't hear about this." I nodded. "And she won't, from me. But when she's older, she'll know the truth. Not out of spite, but because she deserves honesty, something you all forgot how to give." Marissa slammed her palm onto the table. "You can't just take everything." I looked at her gently. "I'm not taking anything. I'm protecting what's mine. What you all tried to steal behind closed doors." Her face twisted with rage, but the fight went out of her fast. She knew the prenup clause left no room for interpretation. Daniel finally broke. "I made a mistake." "You made a plan," I corrected. "A coordinated, deliberate plan. And you got caught." I stepped back from the table, letting the weight of those words settle. The empty envelope in the bathroom. The scanned documents. The screenshots. The prenup. It was all done. All that remained were consequences. I walked to the doorway, pausing just long enough to deliver the final line of the night. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Enjoy your reading on Monday." Then I left the room. 3 months later. The Carter family trust amendment never passed. The moment my attorney submitted the prenup trigger filing, complete with Daniel's hotel messages and the trust amendment drafts, Evelyn's lawyer advised immediate withdrawal. Public scandal was their greatest fear, and I was no longer in the shadows where they preferred me. Daniel moved into a small apartment across town after signing a separation agreement that left the majority of our shared assets in my name. The day he lugged his final box out of the house, he couldn't even look at me. Maybe shame. Maybe defeat. Maybe both. Marissa stopped showing up to family events entirely. Word spread quietly among relatives, she had miscalculated. Evelyn retreated from her social circles, too embarrassed to answer questions about why her son's marriage dissolved under such damning circumstances. As for me, I focused on Lena, on rebuilding peace, on reclaiming the life they tried to edit me out of. I had the locks changed, repainted the living room, and reclaimed my office space with new shelves and warm lighting. I replaced the front door sign with a new brass plate. C. Carter, Independent. Unbroken. Not a company. Not a brand. A promise. Every time I walked past it, I felt the finality settle in. Not bitterness. Not triumph. Just clarity. I didn't lose a family. I survived one. And as I tucked Lena into bed one night, she whispered, "Mommy, you seem lighter." I kissed her forehead. Because I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. And that is the truth I leave you with. Some endings aren't failures. They're doors finally closing behind people who never deserved to stay.